The oldest people in my generation were 13 years old when the Great Recession happened. I remember my dad losing his job and my family's company shutting down in Puerto Rico. It's true what narrator Jared Vinet says in the opening scene for The Big Short. Very few of us know what actually happened in 2008. We were too young or too unaware of anything important to pay attention. But for a generation where a lot of historical remarks happened, gun control activism, a global pandemic, climate change, among others come to mind, we should be a lot more aware about the systems that are put in place for our functioning societies, but almost always inexorably fail us. I have seen the movie 3 times now, and retelling what I've learned from what happened using all the right financial terminology is still quite difficult, but essentially, Dr. Michael Berry realizes that a number of subprime home loans are in danger of defaulting, and uses the money of his fund's investors to short or bet against the housing market. With his actions and with the ease of interrelations in Wall Street, about 8 other men in the finance industry research and work to take a greedy opportunity on this decadent and imminent to fail flaw. The film works to place sequences of all these characters' journeys in the preceding events of the crash in order to create a seamless yet perfectly out-of-place story about the corrupt and fraudulent system that allows these men to make a fortune by taking full advantage of the impending economic collapse in America. Through the use of non-diegetic and diegetic sound, shots, and cinematography such as low-key lighting, handheld camera motion, and rack focus, The Big Short creates an atmosphere of verisimilitude and exposes the societal systems riddled with cynicism and malice, which blind optimism for a better world, yet forces to look within. The scene which encompasses these themes is the following scene, where Mark Baum and a bullish investor of the Bear Stearns banking company discuss the failing market. The scene starts with Jared Venet's continued narration, which gives the scene a heightened sense of verisimilitude.
As the housing markets and banks continued to hemorrhage, only one of the Big Shorts refused to sell, Mark Baum. So it was beyond perfect when he was asked to speak at a conference opposite Bruce Miller, a famous bullish investor. After he and Mark had their debate, Alan Greenspan, one of the architects of the whole crisis, was scheduled to speak. Everyone in Mark's office showed up, even invited friends. This was the Ali versus Foreman of the financial world, the realists versus the fools. And if it seems almost too perfect, trust me, this happened.
The narration is part of the film's non-diegetic sound and plays a key role in the entire film. It's no doubt that The Big Short is quite unconventional in how it tells its story, from breaking the fourth wall to the clipaways which give the film an atmosphere of common universality. Like we are also involved in these events, and like the spectator matters. However, most specifically in this scene, the non-diegetic element of Bennett's narration gives to let us know that the film can be trusted. In a film where characters are constantly finding shortcomings and transgressions in a generally trusted financial system, the narration lets the spectator know that this source of information is not only reliable, but as Baum says about the narrator himself in another scene.
How come you don't hate this guy? He's everything you taught us not to trust.
I can't hate him. He is so transparent in his self-interest that I kind of respect him. Would I buy a car from him? No.
And it's also this diegetic sound in the selected scene, which draws us closer and closer to the world of cynicism and malice that the financial world is. The character of Bruce Miller begins by stating his position first. His position of ignorance within the system. He embodies the archetype of the seemingly detrimental hubris that the financial world boasts. Yet we learn in the end that no repercussions were taken to people like this. Morality and righteousness were never important because capitalism is so broken that no one who deserves to pay will. Baum represents this didactic as a character with the following argument.
Okay, hi. My firm's thesis is pretty simple. Wall Street took a good idea, Louis Ranieri's mortgage bond, and turned it into an atomic bomb of fraud and stupidity that's on its way to decimating the world economy.
How do you really feel?
I'm glad you still have a sense of humor. I wouldn't if I were you. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I have no problem telling someone they're wrong. It's my passion. But for the first time in my life, it's not so enjoyable. We live in an era of fraud in America. Not just in banking, but in government, education, religion, food, even baseball. What bothers me isn't that fraud is not nice or that fraud is mean. It's that for 15,000 years, fraud and short-sighted thinking have never, ever worked. Not once.
Jesus, we're at
37.
We're at 37.
People get caught, things go
It's fucking
south.
plummeting, man. It's fucking plummeting.
When the hell did we forget all that? I thought we were better than this. I really did. And the fact that we're not doesn't make me feel all right and superior. It makes me feel sad.
Every time I fucking hit refresh, it's dropping, man. It always goes down.
And as fun as it is to watch pompous, dumb Wall Streeters be wildly wrong, and you are wrong, sir, I just know that at the end of the day, average people are going to be the ones that are going to have to pay for all of this. Because they always,
32?
always do.
It's 32,
Yeah,
man.
it's fucking tanked, man.
That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I'm gonna drop a deuce at Deutsche.
This speech is completely drained of any optimism, with Baum using a much more generally understandable dialogue instead of financial terminology. Baum understands that this is a human problem, a human flaw. In our need for organized systems, there has only been an insurgence of organized crime, or systematic moral and humanistic decadence. The scene is resolved with no sense of relief, only the outcome that we know will happen, because Baum's team is seen notably keeping track of events with phone vibrations and dialogue on the side. The investor's bank has fallen in stock almost 40%, and as the investor keeps this blind and arrogant optimism, Baum and the film respond with a complete lack of faith for this system. The music intensifies, and people in the audience are seen leaving the room and looking back with concern and imminent doom, representing a nosedive of trust and hope. The film does an amazing job in portraying verisimilitude. This is the realistic and convincing portrayal of a story with details, subjects, and characters that seem similar or true to real life. The film uses this element in ways I had never seen before in filmmaking. In a story which deals with some of the most difficult jargon in industry, McKay had to rely on cinematography and the interjection of cutaways to create an atmosphere of continuity and the catastrophe of these systems. The most notable element is the film's use of a handheld camera to portray a sense of cinema verite. Cinema verite involves stylized setups and interaction between the filmmaker and the subject, which reveal a certain truth about the story and reality. The camera is always acknowledged and performs the raw act of filming real objects, people, and events in a confrontational way, where it represents the truth in what the audience is seeing as objectively as possible, free from any deceptions in how those aspects of life. From this perspective, the filmmaker is the catalyst of a situation, and this is where the film's fourth wall breaks take place. But most specifically, the scene is always in open frame, with a realistic sense of what the room and atmosphere feel like. The camera gives a sense of ambiguity considering how fluid the cinematography is, but this is perfectly encapsulated as well, with the lighting necessary to provide reflexivity and allowing the spectator to know it is watching a film, yet is submerged in the action. The lighting throughout the scene is low-key lighting, coming from various sources. It always stays dim, but acknowledged in some frames. In this shot, it casts a shadow with the projected image that the speakers sit in front of, and moments later, another light lights the side of the investor's face, creating an ominous and demoralizing depiction of him. The rack focuses from phones, to people, to facial expressions, and frenetic movement, create the interpretation that this is a dramatic, intense moment. It makes us feel like tension is slowly rising and building up, like a crucible, ready to blow up at just the right time. Additionally, zoom-ins, cut-ins, and close-ups create tension and drama as well, where the spectator doesn't know what the camera will show them next, but they know what will happen. Close-ups allow for the characters to show emotion from the beginning of the scene when they are anticipating what will happen to the end, where they leave in distress, creating a great juxtaposition of tone using the same digital element. The medium close-up that shows Baum speaking to the audience connects these two subjects and establishes us as the watchers in the scene as both the receiver of the argument Baum makes and as the giver of this idea, as Baum himself. This is also seen when the camera pans from the audience to Baum very fluidly. It allows for a notable dynamic between the speaker and the audience, which the film tries to make itself with us. Cut-ins allow for elements previously established in the scene to create this imagery that the more and more shots put in the scene, the closer the scene is to blowing up, the closer and closer the financial bubble is about to burst and the market crashing. Again, the spectator does not know what will be shown next, but knows what will happen. The bullish investor is in the wrong, and Baum will provide this reasoning with argumentation, not only about the investor's own arrogance, but about the failings of the system, and about his complete lack of trust for it.
Deutsche.
Does our bull have a response? Only that in the entire history of Wall Street, no investment bank has ever failed unless caught in criminal activities. So, yes, I stand by my Bear Stearns optimism.
Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, quick question. From the time you guys started talking, Bear Stearns stock has fallen more than 38%. Would you still buy more?
Yeah, sure. Of course I'd buy more. Why not?
Boom!
The scene ends with shots of almost everyone leaving, and one subject looks back at the stage in pure concern and dismay, like the system failed and fell from his very feet. We know that all of these people have a lot to lose, so they leave to tend to business. Just like we know that with the market crashing and the main characters being right in everything that they do and everything that they find, means that millions of average citizens' lives are at risk. It is without a doubt that The Big Short is an incredibly informative depiction of past events. And despite the concerns the film got over the accuracy or proper appraisal of the events that happened, it certainly blends the lines between the corruption of capitalism, the fraudulence and letdowns that we see in other parts of our lives, both on an individual and collective scale. The characterization of Mark Baum explicates this idea that sometimes we ruin ourselves and our morals. We let others down and are responsible for this, even if we don't see it right away. We think that we are acting in the best way that we can because that is just how we have learned to deal with things, but we might be hurting others. Baum hates the system and he blames a lot of his flaws on it. He knows that he is culpable and works to redeem himself, yet he is in the system. He still works within it, which might not aid his general state, but it works for him. The film also provides a second perspective, or a second resolution, that of Ben Rickard, who abandons the system and sees it from the outside. He knows the damage it has caused, and he knows the repercussions of the power that comes from being inside of it. He chooses to leave it. Even if history repeats itself, even if we are in the same system, and there's a lot of other systems that are also the same level of corruption, whether you live with what you and the system have done, or leave it and live life a little differently, the film teaches us that it's important to look where no one is looking, to understand something more, to dig in, because before you know it, you can become the cause of corruption or the aid to it.